Welcome back to Not Quite My Tempo with Chris. Happy 4th of July. Today I'm going to do a quick review of the new film that came out this weekend about a young George Washington. It's called Young Washington. Directed by John Irwin, a young George Washington, played by William Franklin Miller, faces war, betrayal, and impossible choices that will forge a leader. I'd heard a little about this movie a few months ago. My history professor told my class about it. I didn't know too much about it other than it was about a young George Washington and his life before the American Revolution. This movie was distributed by Angel Studios, who put out Sound of Freedom a few years ago that made a ton of money. A lot of it probably from the Pay It Forward ticket program that this film is also using. Basically, you can pay for someone else to see the movie as a donation. I can be down for a good historical movie, so I was mildly interested going into this, and I did not really care for it, unfortunately. It sounded sort of interesting of telling these early days of George Washington and exploring some of his humanity. He's one of these iconic figures in history that is sort of thought of as an idea sometimes, but looking at the person he was and what he went through before the Revolutionary War sounded like it could be interesting. It's definitely the lesser known part of his history when compared to later in his life. I certainly knew less about these years, but I'm not sure if it's just the events the movie is depicting aren't very compelling, or the movie just didn't bring them to life in the best way, but I could just not get into this story. I never found the French and Indian War terribly captivating learning about it in school, and that's where the bulk of this story is, with Washington rising up in the ranks of the British military and fighting these battles against the French over this Ohio land. When you have a story like the American Revolution that has these powerful cinematic ideas of David versus Goliath and fighting for liberty and independence, there's a much more engaging conflict to get engaged with as a story. When you have George Washington's rise through the military, there is some emotional potential there. There's hints of an underdog story here with him being dismissed and being dedicated to make it into the military and fight for his country, but the emotions this movie was going for are never fully realized. The movie is very stiff. William Franklin Miller as George Washington really doesn't have a strong presence or characterization to draw you in. The character and situations are of course serious. I didn't want everyone to have a loud personality or anything like that, but when you want me to get into the emotions of the character, these ideas of fighting for what you believe and saving your brothers, common battlefield emotions like that can be really moving, but there's not enough of a character or story here to pull those off. When these big emotional moments happen, you can tell these were supposed to be some of the most impactful of the film, but they really fall short. It's a rather dull story and lead character. A lot of the side characters and relationships in his life are also underdeveloped. On some good, the battle sequences are quite strong. The production here with the settings of the Ohio Valley and these old-timey offices and bases, the costumes of the uniforms and the weapons. There's a scale to these battles that's captured very well. The sound design of the guns and cannons going off is shocking. They're chaotic, but you can still follow the action. The battles were the most engaging and immersive part of the film for me for sure. Again, some of the emotional beats in these sequences don't land so well, but the battling themselves and the staging and production here does shine. The supporting cast here is also pretty stacked. Mary Louise Parker, Ben Kingsley, Andy Serkis, and Kelsey Grammer all bring some punch and a little personality to their characters that are also very underdeveloped characters, but their performances make them stand out a little bit more while still feeling like they belong in the setting and time period. So overall, if you're into history, I can't speak to the historical accuracy of the events here, but you might enjoy this. It kind of feels like the type of movie you watch in history class in school, but it's overall not a very good movie in my opinion. The story and characters really failed to pull me in, and the conflict of the movie and the actual events just weren't there for me. Some great battlefield sequences and supporting cast, but that's about it for me. I give Young Washington a 54 out of 100. That's going to be it for me today on Not Quite My Tempo with Chris. I'll be back on Wednesday with a 3-movie highlight on some past U.S. historical movies, but until then, enjoy.